Hello, and first things first, sorry for the setup and the lighting. It's not the best, but I'm in my closet recording booth here, so not much I can really do about that. This video I wanted to discuss because there's a tragic lack of Gene Wolfe content on YouTube. So I wanted to make a video addressing a very common complaint or question people have about Book of the New Sun, and it's when they first get into it. It's how do I start this? And they'll read the first chapter, maybe half the book, and then put it down because they're like, I don't get it. What's going on? Shit's flying in the air, stuff's on fire. And it's an understandable issue that people have because Gene Wolfe, while a genius, is a difficult read. I'm going to go over the difficult, the beautiful, which in my opinion they all fall into the same category. It really depends on your perspective, but I've arbitrarily split them up based on how I feel like people would approach this. So we'll start with the difficult, and the thing people are going to cite as the most difficult thing of Book of the New Sun, most commonly I imagine, would be the use of language. There's been literal books written about the language of Book of the New Sun, like Lexicon, like by Michael Andre Jerussi. He did Lexicon Earthis, which is exactly what it sounds. It's just a lexicon of the words that Gene Wolfe uses and the characters and stuff like that. But the point is that it's complicated, and Gene Wolfe intentionally uses very archaic words, but he uses them in very intentional ways. And I don't want to give away too much because I would love for you to go into Book of the New Sun blind, and if you found this video, then obviously you're maybe at risk of running into spoilers in your Google search. But that might be the biggest stumbling block for a lot of people, the use of language. I've seen and had discussions online with many people about this, and a lot of people feel like you should just roll with it. You will get the words within the context that they are being used, you'll get the gist of them, and then you can move on with a cursory understanding of what Gene Wolfe is trying to say with it. I'm of the opinion, and don't lynch me for this, but I'm of the opinion that reading for the first time with this awareness and going into it with the intention of researching these words, for instance, maybe using a Kindle, the dictionary feature on a Kindle to get the definition of words that you don't understand, I'm of the opinion that that's not a bad approach to have. A lot of people out there think it takes a bit of the magic out of the book. As you'll learn when you finish the book, Gene Wolfe himself actually encourages this sort of approach to the reading of the following books. So I don't think it's that big of a problem to say that you could look up some of the words on your first read through. But do keep in mind that a lot of people have the perspective that you shouldn't at all do that. It is worth keeping in mind both approaches that people have to this, and you can decide yourself which one you'd want to go for. Either I get the gist of the word and the context is used, so I'm not going to look up anymore than what my understanding of the word is from just reading it, or I want to look up all these words, get the context in which they would have been used from the time that Gene Wolfe was ripping them from, and make your decision yourself. So you've decided the language isn't a big problem, and it's something that you can deal with, whether you're going to look up the words or not. Great, cool. Other thing is, you're gonna have to reread. And I think that, and this has been said about many different authors over the years, but rereading it is maybe a better experience than your initial read. It's the same with more accessible like fantasy epics such as Game of Thrones, where the first time through you're kind of, oh god, so many characters, what's going on? But by the time you finish it and you go back and start again, you already have a grasp of these characters, so you can really get into the flow of the story and the politics of it, because you already know all the places and all the characters. It's a similar thing with Gene Wolfe, but it's not really that you know all the places and characters, because there's not a huge reoccurring cast. There is a big cast, but it's mostly really interesting snippets of characters here and there. It's more the entire book and how it's written. But by the time you finish the first book and there's a blurb at the end, an author's note that I'm not going to spoil on you, that you'll read it and you'll go, oh, hold on a minute, wait, if you're saying this, then does that mean that? And it's a great feeling. It's a wonderful feeling. So I do think that if you can get over the language and you can get through the book, if you finish the first book and you're like, can't wait to go on to the next one, I completely understood what happened there. That made sense. The action was clear. No, there's a good chance that the first time I read Book of the New Sun, I went through the full book, got to the end, got to the author's note, and I went, excuse me? What? And I tried to continue, but I couldn't. I had to go back to the beginning because I had realized that I did not have as a big a grasp of the story as I thought I did. So you don't mind rereading, that's great. What about genres? Because if you're the kind of person who likes the strict genres and you like your genres to be well defined and okay, this is fantasy and it's got recognizable fantasy tropes, or this is sci-fi, recognizable sci-fi tropes, horror tropes, blah blah blah, Book of the New Sun mightn't be for you because it is a genre melding wonder. I'm not going to say much more than that, but I do think that if you approach it with a strict mindset of this is this genre, then you're really going to get a bit overwhelmed and you'll probably be even more lost. So approach it with an open mind and I think you'll have a good time. So this has kind of become a controversial term over the years, I feel, and I kind of get why, and I don't want you to jump to conclusions here, but unreliable narrator. Now, a lot of you just recoiled at that because it's a bit of a, it's kind of like the long shot of book form. Like everyone's doing a long shot. Everyone's doing long shots. Everyone's doing unreliable narrators. But Gene Wolfe has crafted probably the best example of an unreliable narrator I have ever seen in literature. Full stop. In the first 2 pages, if you're paying very close attention, you're going to be like, hold on a minute. What are you saying, Severian? That doesn't make any sense. And that's intentional. You have to remember when reading Book of the New Sun that while we can't assume that the character's outright lying to you, but you always have to be aware of the fact that you are getting it from his perspective, and he's going to be painting things in a way that he wants you to perceive them. So if you're not prepared to delve through the confusion of an unreliable narrator, and if it's not your thing, then this might be quite hard for you. The next one is the main character. Severian can be a tricky little fella. I wouldn't be too shocked if people, even the name of the first book, The Shadow of the Torturer, and you start reading and you realize that this main character is a torturer, which is literal. He tortures. That is his entire life. So I can understand why that might seem a bit too grimdark for people and it might put people off. And it is pretty grimdark. It's a very bleak world, very, very depressing. And the main character is a literal torturer. He tortures people. And it's hard to approach a book and think, okay, this character is outright lying to me. I can't trust a thing he says. That's not necessarily the case, but it is something that you definitely need to be aware of. Not that he lies to you outright, but that everything he tells you, he is telling you because he wants you to perceive him in a certain way. What is that way? That's up to the reader to decide. But there's definitely an element of Severian wanting to be perceived in a certain way. And you need to pick up on that way, whatever you may think it is, because it's open for interpretation. But you need to be aware of the fact that he's maybe not the most reliable of people. And since you're in his head all the time, you may be more sympathetic to absolutely everything that happens. But you got to remember that you are in his head and he is going to be trying to make you perceive this in a certain way. And it is contextualized within the world. And I'm not going to say any more than that, but the main character wants you to see him in a certain way. What is that way? Who knows? We can only guess. We can only interpret based on the text. But it is contextualized within the world in a beautiful way. And I just want you to keep that in mind. But that's all you need to know about that. Don't think about that anymore. Just take what I said at face value and roll with it. That was downright Orwellian. If you are put off by the mere concept of following someone that you perceive as immediately being reprehensible because of his profession, then you might have a hard time reading this because Severian is a torturer. And it is in particular, I've always thought the first half, maybe third. It's so weighty that it carries through the rest of the entirety of the book, and you never forget that first third of the very first volume of Book of the New Sun because of how intense it is and how personal it is. That's another thing. It's very, very personal of a story, and we really go on a journey with Severian. It's wonderful stuff. This isn't the difficulty section, and I'm singing its praise, but as I said at the top of the video, I would consider pretty much all of what I'm saying here as positives from me. And you might too, but as I said, it's an arbitrary split. And finally, it actually can be quite hard to discern the actual action of a scene and what happened. There were several scenes I read first time through, however many years ago now, when I was like, I have absolutely no idea what just happened. I think I do, but I'd go back and read it and be like, wait a minute, that's not what, that, I have a completely different mental image now than when I first read this. What is happening? And my third read of the first book, I only realized something that completely changed my mental image of an incredibly important section of the book. Good stuff. Now, as I said, I personally consider pretty much everything here positives, but let's move into the beautiful. Gene Wolfe can somehow find the most beautiful in the most mundane of things. And I don't want to clarify a huge amount on that, but there will be small details here and there that you'll just gloss over, and that's a common theme with Gene Wolfe on a first read. You'll just gloss over stuff. But what you initially perceived as a mundane detail, when you look into the details of that mundane detail, you're going to be impressed with how much you might have missed and how brilliant it is crafted in that way. Which leads very nicely into the next point. He will hide things right in front of your face. It will whoosh over your head huge reveals that you will just completely miss because they're completely obfuscated by things around that reveal that seem way more important. But a lot of the time these are assumptions you could have made, but it's presented in a way and you perceive it in a way where you're like, holy shit, that's crazy. But right in between those two crazy things, there's the actual reveal that you're just like, it's just another part of the sentence, whatever, but that's the part you should be focusing on. And I love that about it. There's so many times I'll be rereading the book where I'll read a paragraph and it's a paragraph I'm like, oh, I remember this paragraph, I love this paragraph, and then I'll be like, holy shit, there's a thing here, I did not see the thing here. And I love that, that's so good. Next point being, it is incredibly philosophically dense. You could approach this book with the intention of reading it in a very specific way. And you could come up with wildly different readings on many ventures into the world of Severian. It's kind of crazy how complicated this is philosophically and how Gene Wolfe has crafted something that you could endlessly pick apart. So if you're a fan of really psychologically stimulating books, then this one is for you. There will be a lot of times you will just stop and think, and you'll just ruminate on what you've just read, and it'll start making you reflect on the real world and your own life. And that the best fiction does that. It makes you think and reflect, not just inwards but outwards. And I love that about Book of the New Sun, and it does it beautifully. It's very stimulating stuff. And finally, the community and discussion. Shout out to the Gene Wolfe subreddit. Shout out to all the podcasts. It's really a wonderful community. I rarely see anyone in any of the discussion boards on Earthlist or the subreddit or anywhere that is abrasive or unpleasant. Everyone just is here to discuss something that they love. They're here to pick it apart, and they're there to pull as much joy from it as they possibly can. And there's a lot to be discussed. As I said in the last point, it's very dense. And the community is wonderful, and one of the most fun things I absolutely love on the Gene Wolfe subreddit specifically, every week or every 2 weeks you'll see someone make a poster saying, just finished Book of the New Sun, here are my thoughts. And everyone always comes out with like the most, oh, I need to know this, or I want an answer to this. It's always different. Everyone always wants to discuss their most pressing thing that they want to discuss is always very different. And people are always open to discussing it with someone new because we all love talking about it. We could talk about it for hours. We could talk about it for days. And it's brilliant. I absolutely love that about it. So shout out to the community. As sad as it is to say, the Gene Wolfe communities out there are rather small in comparison to some of the other monsters of fiction like World of Ice and Fire or Wheel of Time. So that's something to look forward to when you finish Book of the New Sun. There's going to be an outlet for you to just vent all of your frustrations and musings over the story. And I'm going to do this section quick because I didn't want to do it, but I have to if the video is going to be about should you read Book of the New Sun or an intro to reading Gene Wolfe. I need to say something about it. If you're put off so far, then this will be the nail in the coffin, this section here. Do not read if, one, you hate discussion or ruminations on the concept of symbols. This links into a point from earlier, but if you're very strict about your genres and you like your trope-induced dopamine from a specific fantasy, horror, sci-fi trope, then maybe it's a bit more complicated than that, so it mightn't be for you. If you want a light read, this is not a light read. It's super intense, really, really dense. Maybe not something you want to read on the toilet, which never mind. If you're not willing to put in the work and meet Gene Wolfe halfway, then maybe not, because you do have to put in some work here. It kind of links back into the previous point that it's not a light read. You have to meet Gene Wolfe, or maybe it would be better to say you have to walk pretty much all the way over to Gene Wolfe where he has his hand stretched out and then you can touch his hand. You're not necessarily meeting him halfway. You have a ways to go, but the answers are there. The answers are there. If you need the morality of your main character to be completely clear and you can't be questioning your protagonist, then maybe not, because Severian's an incredibly complicated character. So I'm going to cut this short because I wanted to keep this a short video, so if someone's interested in reading Book of the New Sun, they can find a spoiler-free, as I feel comfortable presenting, introduction to Book of the New Sun. So thanks for watching again. Sorry for the lighting, sorry for the sweat. It's pretty hot in here. It's a closet, but you're wearing a sweater. Shut the fuck. After the lockdown fully ends here, I'll get more stuff for this kind of thing. Shoot in a different area. Audio's best in here though. We'll see. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I hope that if you do read Gene Wolfe that you enjoy it. It's a journey. It's a really, really big journey. And it's a good one. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.